This is something that we're certainly keeping an eye on. We have always been very clear and that when it comes to social media platforms, it is their responsibility to make sure that when it comes to misinformation, when it comes to the hate that we're seeing, that they take action, that they continue to take action. Again, we're all keeping a close eye on this. We're all monitoring what's currently occurring.
Well, that was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday with more propaganda, saying that the Biden administration is tracking so-called misinformation on Twitter. Elon Musk claiming Apple has threatened to pull Twitter from the App Store. Joining us right now is the former Democrat mayor of Miami Beach, Philip Levine. Philip, good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. We haven't heard from Apple, aside from a few tweets back and forth from Tim Cook and Elon Musk. Your thoughts on whether or not Apple is going to pull Twitter and why it would do so?
Well, I think that would be pretty challenging if they did that. I mean, let's think about it. Twitter is a big part of our society. Everybody uses Twitter, the news media, constantly. I mean, the issue comes down to Twitter's advertisers. If they're not going to regulate somehow, to some extent, to make sure that we don't have the hate speech on board this platform, I believe that Apple would be the first of many organizations that unfortunately would drop Twitter. So I think we're all hoping that maybe Twitter comes to its senses, saves their advertising, and at the same time provides a very clean, free environment, but an environment that doesn't allow for the hate speech.
I mean, look, I know we've been hearing this propaganda out of the White House now for several months when they tried to do a disinformation governance board. But what specific misinformation is the White House referring to here?
Well, I think what they're referring to, and this is just my guess, is that it comes to really true hate speech, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's racism, whether it's allowing, organizations or people that are trying to create some type of tremendous challenges for us and the people. I think that that's something which they have to look out for. We've seen it before, and we hope we don't see it again. But I think Twitter, it comes down to dollars and cents, right, Maria? It comes down to advertising. If your advertisers are going to stay away, boy, they better hope that Twitter's able to make sure they can make that money in residual subscription revenue, which, who knows?
Well, I mean, I guess, what bothers me about this whole story is much of the misinformation is coming out of the White House. The border is secure. No, it's not. 2 quarters of contraction is not a recession. Yes, it is. A vaccine mandate is not unconstitutional. No, it is unconstitutional. Same with, forgiving student loan debt. I mean, all of these things, there's a tentative deal for the rail companies. No, there wasn't. 4 unions rejected it. All of this misinformation coming out of the White House, and yet they're talking about Twitter as if there's misinformation there. So they just paint a narrative that they want the public to believe when, in fact, it's not actually true.
Well, I think that's the big challenge, and clearly it gets into my thing about Florida. Florida clearly rejected a lot of these things, and as I said before, so goes Florida, so goes the nation, and we saw that. Using Florida as a litmus test is a way to understand, maybe I believe, where the future of the nation's going. And we need that debate, but we need it to be clean, we need it to be forthright, we need it to be above board, and that's the most important thing. And hopefully Twitter provides that type of platform.
Dagan?
Maria, I just wanted to raise one issue with you in particular about Apple. And so Apple is upset about freedom of speech as advocated by Elon Musk and Twitter, but they're not upset about the Communist Party cracking down on the freedom of speech and expression of protesters in that communist nation in China.
Yeah,
I just want to note that Apple 2 weeks ago started limiting the use of the AirDrop wireless sharing function on devices in China right after reports began surfacing that protesters had used the popular feature to spread messages critical of the communist government in China. So who does Apple stand for? What does Apple stand for? Is it for free speech? Is it for the values of the company where Apple was, the country where Apple was born? Or are they standing up for, again, the suppression of the people of China and their ability to protest? Again, that's where these devices are made.
Yep.
I think that Apple ought to, Tim Cook et al. At that company, they ought to pump their brakes and really think about the message that they're sending to customers here in the United States. And that's straight from somebody who just a random person I was talking to who happened to be driving a Tesla this morning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said this yesterday, and, you know, we should talk about this and put a spotlight on it. There were enablers of Nazi Germany in the 1930s as well. And there have been enablers in corporate America of expanding and funding the expansion of the Chinese Communist Party. And so what do you do about that when you see this, you know, place in the world that apparently corporate America sees as a growth story for their businesses, and yet it's a bad actor on the global stage?
Indeed. But they need to particularly Apple needs to seriously think about what its values are. And especially if it's really going to move to take Twitter off the App Store. I think that is, and there's a battle brewing between Musk and Cook. But
yeah,
again, are you really standing up for the Communist Party of China and the suppression of protest in that nation? Because that's the way it looks.
It's a really good point. It's a great point, and this is the time to put a spotlight on it when we see the people uprising. Philip, any thoughts on that before you go? Final word.
Well, I got to tell you that we saw this in Florida, and I think for a company to get involved in politics, it's very challenging. I mean, look what happened with Disney World. When we look with Governor DeSantis. I mean, I'm sure if Disney could ring the clock back a little bit, they probably would do things a little bit differently. And who knows? Maybe Apple will find themselves in the same situation.
Yeah. All right, Philip, great to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Philip Levine this morning.